What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about the best budget smartphones, and we're going to keep it in that $200 price range. So first off is the Umidigi F1. So this guy actually has a 5150 milliamp battery, and it was pretty good. It was really hard for me to kill this phone as a light user. I think I went 2 days and I still couldn't kill the phone. So you do have that fast charging, 18 watts, which is very nice. So it charges very fast. So you have an IPS panel, which was pretty nice, a 6.3 inch. It is 1080p, 409 for the PPI. It was a pretty decent looking panel. You got the little water drop notch, gave off some good colors. You also have Android 9 with the Helio P60 processor and the Mali G72 GPU. It was pretty sufficient for gaming and just doing, applications and stuff like that. I did not have a problem. So with you do have micro SD support up to 256 gigabytes, and you do have 128 gigabytes of storage and 4 gigs of RAM. The weak point on this phone is definitely the camera. So you have a dual camera setup, 16 megapixel and an 8 megapixel, and a 16 megapixel front facing camera, and it was a little underwhelming. It wasn't the best photos in any condition, whether it was good lighting or with the front facing camera, but you do keep the headphone jack. This phone did surprisingly have NFC, so you also have USB Type-C. The fingerprint scanner on the back was very fast, so I really like this phone. It just came really short with the camera. Next is the Moto G7 Power. So this is going to be the best overall battery performer from the stuff that I've read about this phone. So it does really great. So you have a 5000 milliamp battery, and you have a really nice classic Motorola design. It's a plastic body, but it's got a nice weight to it. You do have a splash resistant design, an IPS display. It has a notch. It is a 1570 by 720 display, so 720p, 279 for the PPI, so a pretty decent display. You do have Android 9 Pie, but this is why this phone gets such good battery life. You have the Snapdragon 632, so it's like kind of in the middle there with the Adreno 506 GPU. So you also have micro SD support up to 1 terabyte and 32 gigabytes of internal storage and 3 gigabytes of RAM. Now the cameras on here are pretty decent. You have the 12 megapixel camera will get you a decent photo and good lighting. You also have an 8 megapixel selfie as well. It actually shoots in 2160p, and the front facing shoots in 1080p. So you do have the headphone jack on here as well, which is nice. This phone does have NFC on it, which is awesome. And you do have USB Type-C. Now you do have 15 watts for that fast charging. So this phone, if you're looking just for the best overall battery life, you would probably are going to want to look at this one, because this one from the tests that I've seen has excellent battery life. Next is the Galaxy M20. I was able to get my hands on this one, another 5000 milliamp battery, and this thing again was very hard to kill. 2 days, could not kill it as a light user. So this is something you're definitely going to want to look at if you're a Samsung fan. So you actually have a PLS TFT display. It is a 6.3 inch 1080p, which is awesome, 409 for the PPI. So for this price, I think you actually have some pretty decent specs on here. You have Android 9 with the One UI. You have the Exynos 7904 processor, along with the Mali G71 GPU. For my performance, it was fine running apps and games. I didn't really have a problem, any stutter problems or anything like that. Micro SD support up to 1 terabyte. I love when the phones have that. You do get 32 gigs of internal storage and 3 gigs of RAM, so you basically will never run out of storage with this guy. The cameras on here are actually very nice. Samsung actually does great with their image processing, 13 megapixel and a 5 megapixel ultra wide, along with an 8 megapixel front facing camera. So you do have that headphone jack on here, which is very nice. This phone did not come with NFC, but you do get that fingerprint scanner rear mounted, and like I said, you get that 5000 milliamp with 15 watt fast charging. So this is another good battery performer, pretty decent specs, decent cameras, and if you're a One UI fan, you'll love it. So next is the Galaxy A20s. So I really love this phone. So it's got the biggest display on the list, I believe, at 6.5 inches, and you have a 4000 milliamp battery. So it's a pretty big phone, and it still gives off some really great battery life. So you have an IPS display, like I said, 6.5 inches, very big. It is 720p, 264 for the PPI, but but it had a really good display, so don't let the specs fool you. For me looking at it, it was pretty nice. So you do have Android 9 with the One UI, the Snapdragon 450 processor, and the Adreno 506. So basically you'll be playing games from medium to low on this guy. You do have micro SD support up to 1 TB, 32 gigabytes of storage, and 3 gigs of RAM. So the cameras were actually pretty impressive and kind of medium to good lighting. I actually really liked it. It's a triple camera setup, 13 megapixel wide, 8 megapixel ultra wide, and a 5 megapixel depth sensor. It took some pretty good photos along with the 8 megapixel selfie camera. So I was really impressed with that. So you do have a 3.5mm jack still on here, no NFC, and you do have USB Type-C, of course, with the fingerprint scanner on the back. You do have 15-watt fast charging, so if you need a really big phone with great battery life, this is something you should look at. And last is the cheapest phone on the list, the Xiaomi Redmi 8A. So it's got a 5000 milliamp battery, and look at the price point on this guy, crazy cheap. So you have a 6.2-inch display, very respectable. It is a 720p display, basically 271 for the PPI. It is an IPS display, but you do have 2 gigabytes of RAM, 2 to 4 depending on the base model or which model you get. A Snapdragon 439 processor. You have the MyUI, which I love. It's actually got MyUI 11 on it now. Adreno 505 GPU, so the specs are respectable for, you know, basically a $100 phone in that price range. You have a micro SD support, which is awesome, up to 512 gigabytes. You also have 32 gigabytes of storage and 2 gigs of RAM. So you only have a single camera on this guy, and you do have a 12 megapixel camera, and you do have a 8 megapixel selfie camera. So from what I've seen, it's decent, nothing too crazy. You can't expect a lot from a, you know, $100 phone. You do keep the 3.5mm jack as well. So this guy actually has an infrared port, which is pretty crazy. So when's the last time you seen that? You do have USB Type-C on here as well, and in addition you have 18-watt fast charging. So if you need just a really cheap phone, and I think the specs on here are decent, 2 gigabytes of RAM, that's going to scare a lot of people away. But you know, if the processor is decent on here, then, you know, if you're not doing a lot on your phone, then it'll be more than enough for $100. So thanks for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one.